Welcome back to Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. For the second half of our show, we travel down the Danube to beautiful and historic Budapest to meet with Zoltan Kesz, co-founder and director of the Free Market Foundation. Zoltan, welcome to the show.
Hi, Bill. Welcome to Budapest.
Thank you. It's been a wonderful visit. There's just so much history here to go into the main square and look back 1,000 years and understand what's come through. And maybe that's the best place to start. Give us a little sense of history and character of the Hungarian people and take us back to the early days.
Well, you said it's 1,000 years. It's perfectly true. It's a little more than 1,000 years already. And, well, I don't want to go back 1,000 years because I could spend a lot of time with that here. However, like most important parts of Hungarian history, as you've seen, all these statues, all these nice buildings around Budapest, emperors, warriors, all these interesting people, but a lot of repression. And if we go back in time, let's say about 500, 600 years, we see 150 years of Turkish rule in Hungary.
That's right.
Then we see another 100 years of the Habsburgs with the Austro-Hungarian Empire later on. And then comes the bloody 20th century, unfortunately, with all the bad things happening in Hungary, always participating on the wrong side in both world wars, and then finally falling into the hands of the Soviets, being a satellite state of the Soviet Union. So repression after repression after repression. So basically, in the latest part of the 20th century, it was the Soviet aggression.
The scars are still so visible across the city. There's some good city life. There are wonderful parts of town, but you could still see some places where the mark of communism was left behind.
Well, some, but I can say that in the past 25 years, there have been a lot of reconstruction, rebuilding, renovation. So we don't see that much sign in the buildings themselves. We see that, however, in the thinking of people, unfortunately. Especially when we talk about free market and capitalism, a lot of people still have a kind of nostalgia towards socialism, unfortunately.
Really? Even though they lived through it, they feel some nostalgia.
Yeah, exactly, because a lot of people feel that it was, safe times. Everybody supposed to have a job.
Everybody knew their place.
Yeah, exactly. So they, how people work. They are willing to give up some kind of freedom for security and certainty. So this is what you would feel if you talk to a lot of people, unfortunately.
And what is it? It's not a violent society. Do they fear unemployment? Is that what bothers them?
They feel a lot of things, especially unemployment. Especially since due to the economic crisis, it's now unemployment that a lot of people feel. So they are not secure. So they kind of... We will obviously talk about the present-day government, but this is where I can tap into that. Present government is bringing up a lot of so-called socialist issues.
We'll get up to that. I really want to give our listeners some sense of the trajectory of the country, its history of repression, a lot of brutality. There's some Holocaust memorials here in town that were...
Yeah, especially that this year is the 70th anniversary of the Hungarian Holocaust. So this is a perfect year, to talk about that. And there have been a lot of controversies about that as well. If you know the history of the Hungarian Holocaust back in 1944, more than 400,000 Hungarian Jews were rounded up, mostly in the countryside, and taken to Auschwitz, Birkenau. Yes.
Yeah.
And a lot of people in Budapest were also taken to the ghetto, and a lot of them shot into the Danube. I don't know if you've seen the
I've seen
memorial,
the shoe memorial.
Yeah, so this year is the 70th anniversary, and
some people still alive who remember.
Some, the Jewish community in Hungary is quite small. It's about 100,000 people.
Well, those was one of the largest synagogues in the world.
Exactly, and one of the most beautiful synagogues in Budapest. Exactly, yes.
So there's a lot of scars.
There's a lot of scars.
And there is comparing it to Prague, there's a heaviness. There seems to be a heaviness here that I didn't see when I was in Prague. Prague just seemed to have recovered a little more quickly or a little more lively commercially. I don't know. It's only been once to both cities, but
I don't know. I don't see that difference too much. I go to Prague a lot, and if I compare Budapest and Prague, Prague is just more compact, smaller. So it's livelier. It looks livelier. Here you have to go distances to see things.
So certainly there is a spirit of rebellion and a spirit of independence in Hungary. The revolution of 56 did gain a lot of attention. It was unsuccessful ultimately, but certainly there are people who remember, people who are part of that here today. Take us to that point in time.
Well, 1956 was an interesting point of Hungarian history, and this was after the Second World War. Hungary still had, as you mentioned, a sense of independence, a sense of freedom, rebellion. I mean, we have a long history of rebellions against the Turks, against the Habsburg, and this time against the Soviets. And this was an unsuccessful rebellion against the Soviets. For 2 weeks, it looked to be a successful one, with Imre Nagy becoming the Prime Minister of Hungary, the Russians leaving the country, unfortunately only temporarily.
Back with tanks.
And then back with tanks at the beginning of November. And
the Prime Minister was ultimately executed.
And the Prime Minister 2 years later, in 1958, was executed on June 16th. And you mentioned scars. 200,000 people left the country in 56.
And
that was a huge exodus, going to the United States, to Australia, the UK, Germany.
We benefited from that.
And that's what I wanted to say.
Were started by Hungarians who came, and
a lot of countries benefited from that. And you see, it was usually the people who were the rebellious type who left. So people who
had ambition.
People who were just, let's stay calm. Like the herd, I would say, just stayed. I mean, a lot of people stayed, unfortunately, and didn't do anything.
Suffered under Soviet domination, but in '89 lit the fuse, opened up the border to Austria, and allowed the East Germans to escape, which precipitated the fall of the Berlin Wall. I certainly remember that quite plainly.
And Hungary played a very, very crucial role in that. I mean, it was 25 years ago, this August, when we celebrated the opening of the Iron Curtain, because if you remember, this was the picnic at the Hungarian, that's what so-called picnic at the Hungarian border, where a lot of East Germans came to picnic there, and the Hungarian government opened the borders. And, that led to, or I wouldn't say that started a lot, it was a chain reaction, yes. So I also remember that very vividly. I mean, I have very good memories from that time. I was a high school student, so we, that's when people are very rebellious, and, we wanted to have the Soviets out, we wanted a new life, and so on.
So take us forward from '89. So what happened next?
After '89, actually, in 1990 was when the first so-called free government, free democratic government was formed in Hungary, and a lot of changes came in 1990, and the people had to learn that life is not about socialism, life is not about the state playing a huge role in their lives.
For everybody.
And exactly. That was the time of privatization, when a lot of companies, state-owned companies, became privatized.
And how did that go? I mean, in Russia, it fell to the oligarchs. How did it go here in Hungary? At
first, I believe that it went very well. Most of the enterprises, however, went to the hands of foreign entities, like banks, for example, went into the hands. Yeah, exactly. People, not only the capital, but the know-how, and that was very important as well. So I would say that the first 8 to 10 years of this transition went very, very well. People enjoyed their freedom. People enjoyed the fact that you can go abroad, you can buy a lot of stuff. And
was property also private property,
and
apartments?
Private property, exactly. Yeah, so a lot of things, became private. You could own things
for the first time.
Yes, yeah, for the first time in lots
modern
of decades.
History,
yes. However, the first decade, or I should say that the first 14 years of this decade, are not a success story in Hungary, unfortunately. It can be mentioned that it's somehow due to the economic crisis, but not necessarily because of that.
That's just the last few years.
That's just the last few years. So back in 2002, with a socialist government, we see one of the first problems of these things rising, that the socialists were giving away a lot of stuff.
Buying votes.
Buying votes. And then ever since
then... It's a worldwide strategy, and it seems to work.
Once you promise free beer, everybody wants free beer. But... That's where I put it, where this present day failure of the state started, because the state wanted to grow, wanted to be bigger, wanted to have more influence over people, and people bought it.
Zoltan, give us a little insight into both the political system and the dominant parties here in Hungary.
We have a very interesting political system. Back in 2010, was when the present government, Fidesz, came to power second time, because first was 1998. We have to know about these people is that back at the time of the transition, they were the most liberal, the classical liberal sense, liberal. They were very anti-Russian, pro-independence. But back in 2010, they gained 2/3 majority. And in 2010, they were not anymore liberal.
Interesting.
Very conservative, not fiscally conservative, very conservative, very pro-religion, for big state. And for them, using the anti-communist rhetoric, it was very easy to get votes. It was very easy to get support from Hungarians living abroad because, they promised them citizenship, they promised them voting rights. So very interesting things started back in 2010. And you can ask the question, okay, it's 4 years. Unfortunately, this year, the majority of the country voted for this party again. And
so it has popular support.
Very huge popular support. They have the anti-communist rhetoric, the anti-EU rhetoric. They are against multinational companies, and they are very anti-capitalist and
pro-religion.
And pro-religion as well.
So they're pushing all the buttons. How's the economy doing here?
If you look at the macro level, we can say that in the past year, there's this limited growth, basically. I think it was 3-point-something% of GDP.
A little bit better than Europe, but not.
I mean, which is not bad, I would say, but you have to look at where the money comes from. Because in this economy that we have, first, in 2010, the money came from the private pension funds. The government froze the private pension funds.
Took them over, basically.
I always say they stole our private pensions.
There's talk of that in the United States, too.
So private pension funds, public works, for example. Now the government...
Stimulus spending.
So stimulus package, right. Yes, we have all these stimulus packages. So public works, for example, that helps the government a lot to boost the figures. Also punishing successful companies like banks, the energy sector. I don't know how much you know about it. In the past year, we had the government running a very successful campaign on punishing the energy sector by forcing them to cut the utility prices by 20%.
So there's no investment in infrastructure if they can't earn it back. Interesting.
Exactly. And the government is very, very successful because, it resonates with the people.
Price controls, wonderful.
Nice.
Free stuff.
And when you get your, monthly electricity check, you can say, oh, this month the government saved this money for me. So this is where we stand at the moment.
And where is Hungary with youth unemployment? That is a big problem through much of Europe.
Okay, yeah, that would have been the fourth point that I wanted to mention. The government has very good figures regarding unemployment because in the past 3.5 years, more than 500,000 people left the country.
Really?
Especially the young.
Just checked out.
Checked out, exactly.
Where'd they go?
The UK, Germany, Austria, some to the United States.
So the next generation's voting with their feet.
Exactly. And this is making it really hard for Hungarians who are here. Because, this is the generation of in their 20s or 30s who would be, taxpayers here.
Right.
So
starting
now,
businesses, raising families.
They are hopeless here. I mean, look, out of 10 million people, 500,000 left in the past 4 years. That's a huge figure.
Because the borders are relatively open. I mean,
they are very. We are in the European Union.
Right.
No border control. There is a free flow of labor force in the European Union. Although there are some countries that want some restrictions. but still a lot of people go, and they, as you mentioned, they vote with their feet.
It's a brain drain, basically.
It's a different kind of brain drain.
National brain drain.
Yes, as I mentioned, 1956, 200,000 leaving the country. Now 500,000 leaving the country.
So Zoltan, tell us a little bit about the Free Market Foundation. It really sounds like you're fighting an uphill battle here in Hungary.
Well, the Free Market Foundation is one of the few NGOs that operate in Hungary, and nowadays the life of NGOs is not very easy in the country. The government in the past couple of months has been trying to crack down on NGOs. Just this week they raided the police raided offices of 2 NGOs in Budapest. So the Free Market Foundation was primarily formed 3 years ago, almost 4 now, to spread the ideas of free market society, spread the ideas of classical liberalism. And as we started, we were kind of like an educational organization. I used to be a teacher, so kind of it was in my alley to do that, going to schools, for example, talking about why liberty is important.
And can you get access? They let you in the schools, or do they try to block your access?
So. I mean, Schools are centralized, but if you know some teachers who let you in, they close their doors, and then you don't publicize these things very much. But yes, you can go to schools. You can have debates, for example, and we also have a very successful blog that we started back 3 years ago.
What's the URL for that?
It's kapitalizmus.hvg.hu. I will write it down. It's about capitalism, actually. It's about a lot
in Hungarian.
Hungarian.
Yeah, of course. Have there been efforts to suppress it or any efforts to censor it?
No. Luckily not.
Is media fairly free here still?
When you say fairly free, what do you mean? I mean, here we have people, the media, who can write or broadcast anything, basically. However, a lot of the media is in the hands of the pro-government oligarchs. So especially people from the countryside, they get their access from the state-owned media, and that's or these oligarch-owned medias.
But they're not arresting reporters or anything like that.
No, they're not.
Okay, hasn't reached that point.
No, luckily not. Hopefully it won't. So basically, the Free Market Foundation started off as a free market organization. We had back in 2012, our Milton Friedman tour. So we went to schools. Milton Friedman's parents were Hungarians. A lot of people don't know that. And that year was the 100th anniversary of Milton Friedman. So we did that. And then last year, we started a campaign against racism in Hungary. Because one thing that I did not mention is that about 10 years ago, there came the rise of a Nazi or neo-Nazi party. And now they are in the parliament.
Really?
21% of the votes they got.
21% to a neo-Nazi party? Wow, that should be of concern to some people, I would think.
And they are in the European Parliament as well. They have been there for 5 years now.
So you're seeing anti-Semitism come back now in Budapest?
In a way, yes. In a way, unfortunately. And this is an openly anti-Semitic party. So we at the Free Market Foundation decided to launch some campaigns about that, to address awareness. 2 programs that I want to mention. One is what we call Ridicule the Radical, because these neo-Nazis are very radical people, and we created a website on which we have memes, cartoons, videos, and we are trying to ridicule. It is very good, actually. It's very effective. And the other one is what we call the damage calculator. We look at how much economic damage is caused by Nazis in Hungary. We look at the international media. We look at how many times there's a bad picture depicted about Hungary because of them. And we have our methodology to calculate and come up with an amount.
And where is their support coming from? What sectors of society find this so compelling?
A lot of people who are hopeless. A lot of people who are undereducated, who find that
feel they have no future.
There is a scapegoat always. Now it's the Jews or the Roma population, and this
is there a big Roma population?
There is a huge Roma population.
Still in Hungary?
Oh yeah, about 7-8% of the population.
Really?
We don't know the exact figures. Yes.
And are they integrated in society, or do they live more or less separately?
More or less separately. And this present government doesn't have any intention to integrate them, unfortunately. And this neo-Nazi party is getting a lot of support from Russia, from Putin.
Financial support?
Oh yeah, a lot of financial support. Yes, and just next month, in 3 weeks, there's going to be a conference held in Budapest, actually organized by an American group, but having speakers from our neo-Nazi party, speakers from Putin's circles, Alexander Dugin, for example, who's now a big mouthpiece of Russian nationalism.
What's the reaction here in Hungary to events in the Ukraine and Crimea?
If you look at the government's standpoint on that, it's very shocking. Our government doesn't really want to take any stand, because now we are friends with Russia, economically especially. So our government is trying to stay quiet. Just this week, the Speaker of the House mentioned that, whatever is going on in the Ukraine is a circus. And he said it to a Polish television channel, so it caused a lot of
ruckus,
uproar in Poland. And our Prime Minister is saying that the sanctions against Russia are hurting Hungary, and we are kind of playing, this game of swinging, sometimes saying something pro-European Union, mostly siding with Putin.
It's like the Cold War coming back and the unallied states trying to play both sides.
Yeah, but once you look at the fact that we are in the European Union, we are in NATO, and the United States has a NATO ally that is playing the tunes of Putin, that's not
such a good
very attractive thing in the U.S.
What do Hungarians think about the future of NATO?
I don't know what Hungarians in general think about it, but I believe that in case of Ukraine, I think it's good to have NATO. It's good to have an organization that is there, for example, in the Baltic states now, in Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, that they are bordered with Russia, and they need to be protected once it comes to that point. I hope it won't come to that point, but you never
Why do you
know.
think the Baltic states seem to have done so much better handling their freedom than Hungary?
If you look at their economic performance back in 10 years ago, look at, for example, Estonia. Estonia actually did what Hungary never wanted to do, introducing a lot of so-called unpopular reforms. It's in Estonia, it wasn't about buying votes. It was about fixing the country.
Right.
Of course,
and they
in
went
the
cold
short
turkey.
run.
They absolutely went cold turkey.
Yeah, I mean, in the short run, their figures were not good, but in the long run, they're performing much better. Same is true for Poland, for example, with Mr. Balcerowicz back 15 years ago, doing exactly the same things.
Make the hard choices now and let the economy grow.
We don't have people who are making hard choices now.
So, Zoltan, what are your hopes for the Free Market Foundation going forward?
Well, Bill, I'm very optimistic, otherwise I wouldn't do it. I believe that education is a key factor in what we are doing.
Can you get the young to stay?
I hope so. I hope we can get the young to stay. I hope we can get the country turned into a direction where they will turn away from this, almighty huge state, and they will look for freedom, look for personal responsibility. And, I have to share this story with you. Back in 1998, 1990, at the time of the transition, I was in the U.S. I was a high school student in Georgia.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in northern Georgia, actually. And, in Georgia, everybody's talking about Martin Luther King Jr. and I Have a Dream and all that. I was 16 years old at the time. I was fascinated by the United States. Actually, that was the first country I went to in the West. And back in our history classes in Georgia, we had to write our I Have a Dream speeches. And I remember that I had a dream that by the time my son becomes 16, I want him to live in a prosperous society just like in the US. And now my son is 13.
Wow.
And I feel that I have now three more years to fulfill this dream that I had back then. But I'm optimistic. I mean, if I look at young people, if I look at what they think about the world, what they think about the West especially, I think the young people are the hope of Hungary.
Well, that's true across the world. Zoltan, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you very much, Bill.
Well, that was Zoltan Kesz, co-founder of the Free Market Foundation, who we caught up with in Budapest, here on Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. If you have any suggestions for topics or guests, please visit realclearradio.org, click on the email Bill link, and drop me a line. Real Clear Radio is produced in conjunction with Real Clear Politics, America's premier independent political website. That wraps up our show for this week. Join us next week, same time, same station, when we return to Boston to speak to the celebrated international chef Daniel Boulud about the opening of his new restaurant right on Boston Street. See you then.